Thank you everyone for being here. And my name is Jay Thompson, and I'm happy to be hosting the second of our campaign evenings. And hoping that this will be a chance for those who are interested to hear from people other than myself about issues that matter to Espoo residents, and particularly from several of our students. So I've invited a handful of students. One thing they all have in common is that they're all graduates of Espoo International School, and they have chosen a variety of study paths since they have graduated from Espoo International, and this is part of the reason why we wanted to hear from them and talk about some of the issues that face Espoo students. So first of all, I'd like to again thank you all for being here, and then give you a chance to introduce yourselves. And thought we'd start with the student who finished up the longest to go from Espoo International, Jordan. Can you introduce yourself a bit?
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much, Jay, for inviting me on this panel. It's an honor, and it's generally just nice to see you again after all these years. So my name is Jordan Savalainen. I'm a Finnish-American student, 25 years old. I graduated from EIS roughly 10 years ago. After doing the IB at Matliden, I decided to set my horizons to the UK. I did a biochemistry bachelor's at the University of Glasgow. And from there, I continued to the University of Edinburgh, where I'm currently still doing my master's. I'm actually living in Finland right now because I'm doing my master's placement at Meilahti. So I'll be staying here for the foreseeable future.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot, Jordan. Great to have you. And we'll move on to Magnus. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Magnus. I graduated from EIS about 5 years ago. And after that, I went to Matliden's Gymnasium IB side for about 3 years. And I'm currently doing my bachelor's in Lappeenranta. It's a bachelor's in technology and engineering science. So yeah, thank you for inviting me as well, Jay.
All right. Thanks a lot, Magnus. Okay, and we're on to Shushu.
Hi everyone, I'm Shushu Silvennainen. Thank you, Jay, for inviting me here as well. Yes, so after EIS, I went to Tapiolan Lukio, so Tapiolan High School. So Finnish slide. I guess currently in this panel, I'm the only one who decided to go to a Finnish high school, but I have just finished my final year. So studying for entrance exams at the moment.
All right, so yes, you did finish. Now you're getting ready to go. I wasn't sure if you had at what stage you were there, but now you're on to the next stage. Great. Okay, thanks. And then we have Stella.
Yeah, hi. I'm Stella, Finnish American living here. It's a pleasure, Jay. I moved here in 2017 and went straight to 8th grade in EIS, and then graduated about 2 years ago. So now I'm in my second year at Matliden, the IB side. Yeah, not really sure what's going to be after, but that's to see.
Yeah. You got plenty of time to figure that out. So yeah, and for me, it's always a joy to see students who've kind of see how life develops with for students as they move on, and just to see you in a different stage of life, and you're all growing up. So neat to have that chance to hear more about your lives now. So and I've had the privilege of being the guidance counselor for all 4 of these students, and and that's something that gives me great joy to see that their study opportunities work out for them. So tonight we want to really hear straight from the students about a variety of issues, and we've created a series of questions and let students kind of choose from the areas that they had most interest in discussing and sharing their own perspectives on. And so those different areas are the kind of the pros and the cons of studying in Espoo schools, and then talking about availability of study places in Espoo schools, and then a bit about the COVID crisis and how that's affected things for students. Then about student well-being, and possibly we'll touch on some other topics too. But that's where we'll start off. And so Jordan has had a unique path among the students represented here, and as he mentioned, he's already been studying out of Finland too, and so he's got a different perspective from the rest in that way. But I thought, Jordan, could you share from your own experience, what do you think is the best thing about Espoo schools?
So I don't know if I mentioned, but I am full-bred Espoo schooler, if you can say that. I've been to school in Espoo pretty much my entire life before I went abroad. And I think one thing that definitely stuck in my mind after moving abroad is there's this element of accessibility in Espoo schools that I think was quite lacking in the UK. And I'm mainly talking about when students have issues, if they're having some problems with learning, or they're having health issues. I remember in Kometta we had several students who fell into that category, but the staff did everything in their power to try to keep them in school and help them deal with their difficult situation. I've found out that many times in the UK there are a lot of school dropouts, and then kids sort of end up in this cycle where either they're sort of switching schools all the time, or then they even end up institutionalized. So that's something really positive that I've experienced with Espoo schools.
Okay, great, excellent. Yeah, I suppose this is something that is in some cases becoming a bit more challenging in schools as the ratio between some of the support staff and number of students is getting a little more difficult as the schools have grown and class sizes have grown. Great that you get to witness a really positive experience there, and great, that's one of the experiences. All right, so how about the other side? What do you think when you think back to your now and then back in when you were in your younger years of studying? What do you think were some of the challenges? What were some of the areas where Espoo schools you think could have done better?
So I don't know how the situation has changed at this point, and I know that this is a topic that's probably you had mentioned it in the list of questions. I remember that, including myself, there were a lot of students that had issues with bullying, and I understand that it can be quite a tricky topic to deal with when you're a teacher. You need to understand all sides of the situation. But from my experience, I found that a lot of students, they ended up in sort of this cycle of bullying that if they're finally able to sort of build up the courage to inform the staff about bullying, then it's one little slap on the wrist, and then of course it fades off for a while, but then the bullying continues. Of course, I don't know how this situation has evolved, but then again, I also understand the complexity behind this issue, and because as you mentioned, there's also a problem with the student to staff ratio, and it's extremely difficult to look after every single interaction that's going on within the school, whether it be positive or negative.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks. You definitely touched on a big one. We might hear more about that later on with some of these questions about student welfare, but this absolutely is. It's made some very recent headlines this past year with some severe situations in the capital area, and I think that we're pretty fortunate with the stance towards that basically no tolerance for bullying, or zero tolerance for bullying in a lot of Espoo schools, including Espoo International. However, it doesn't mean the problem does not exist, and we know that there are some recent legislation to help give a little more teeth to make some of the bullying a bit, well, to basically classify it as criminal activity, so that the police can have a bit more invitation to be involved with these serious ones. So, yeah, sorry to hear that, but I'm glad you mentioned it, because it's a really important topic. Great. Okay. And as we go through these, if others want to make comments on any of these questions, feel free to share those. But great. Actually, now we'll move on to Shushu to talk about this issue of availability of study places. So, I mean, first of all, from your own experience and maybe from others you've heard from, do you think that it's difficult to get a study place in high schools in Espoo?
Well, of course, it depends a lot on the individual. For example, for IB, it's very hard because, as probably all the people who've gone to Matleidens know, there are only 2 IB schools in Espoo, really. So there's Matleidens, and then there's Etelä-Tapiola, and each school, I just checked before this meeting, only gives out like 50 places. So that's only 100 places for the students in Espoo. And then, of course, you can also apply from outside of Espoo. So, of course, there's more competition for those schools. For the national side, it's a lot nicer. I myself went to Tapiolan Lukio. So it's a lot nicer because there are a lot more places. So we had 120 places for all the students. So it's a lot easier. But of course, if you don't have a good Finnish language, then of course it's very hard to apply for a Finnish school. Because even for me, who has a dad who speaks Finnish, and I spoke Finnish at home sometimes, it's still a high threshold to, of course, learn all the vocabulary in Finnish. And then, of course, you're learning at the same time. So you're learning new stuff while still trying to learn all that old stuff. And as well, when I was applying at the time, you had to pay for almost all your school supplies. So, of course, your computer is very expensive. I'm not sure about the IB side, but for the Finnish side, you had to buy your own computer. You had to buy all your own books. And you had to buy a calculator that was also very, very expensive. So for many people applying for the national side, it can be a huge threshold to get over because, of course, everyone isn't making that much money, of course. So it can, when it accumulates, it's quite a lot of money. And then, of course, there are all the social factors as well. So, for example, vanhat, if you want to buy a dress or a suit or accessories and shoes, then, of course, that adds to the cost. What else? Also the GPA for Espoo, last year it was quite high. So you had to have a 6.3? No, it was 8.3, sorry, point average to get into any high school in Espoo, which is quite high, especially thinking that these are all middle schoolers. So they're all about 15 years old applying to try to get into a high school. And of course, then if you want to get into a good high school, you have to have a pretty high average. I remember for Tapiola at the time when I was applying, it was about a 9.13 to get in. So it can be very challenging, especially if you want to go to a specific school. And of course, for IB, there are entrance exams, which kind of help. So you don't have to have such a high GPA. But then, of course, everything rests on your performance during that one entrance exam. So if you're having a bad day that day, then too bad.
Yeah.
I think that was about the main things. So in my opinion, it is pretty hard to get into a high school, especially in Espoo, because it's so close to Helsinki.
Yeah, you've done a great job of summarizing the current situation as well. You actually did your homework, but I'd say that for example, Tapiola is a great example of a school that has now had a high number again this year who chose it as their first choice, and so it's expected that the GPA is probably going to be the minimum GPA to get in is probably going to be similar to what you had in your year. I would say over 9, most likely, and this
it's rising all the time.
Yeah, it seems to be it does of course mean it's very difficult for a number of students to get in, and all of you were strong students when you were finishing up your basic education. That gave you a real advantage to get in, but you all probably also know people that didn't get study places they wanted, and that's a really common story. In some cases, don't get a study place at all, in Espoo or anywhere else nearby. So, but good to hear your own perspective on that. Go ahead, Stella.
I was just going to add about of course, there's really low amount of places for IB schools, but then it's also like a lot scarier if I don't really speak Finnish or not well enough to study in it. And luckily, it was never really a question of if I was going to get into an IB school or not. But I know that was a case with a couple people. So it's really like if you don't get into one of those IB schools, then other than ISH, there's really no option, which is not something that inherently needs changed, or I don't really know what you can really change about that, but it's definitely a hard thing to think about for a lot of students, especially from Espoo International School, where a majority, I don't think, speak Finnish.
Yeah, you bring up a great point where students who don't have strong enough Finnish skills to study in Finnish really have limited options. And of course, there is the IB, but as you say, and as Shushu referred to, there's a limited number of spaces. And even if you include all the IB schools in the capital area, you still have 5 public IB schools, and none of them are easy to get into. And so there are students that really have very few, there are no backup options in English, essentially, besides private education, which is very expensive. So this is something that absolutely I know myself and many others are advocating for an increased number of IB study places, but also what Espoo doesn't have is any kind of a bilingual high school. And there are English/bilingual options in vocational school, and they've added more of those recently, which is great at Omnia. But there are Helsinki has 3 different bilingual high schools, and Espoo at this point doesn't have any. And so I'm really hoping, because I think there's a lot of students that might be, I know are willing to study in Finnish if they can also use their English language skills to help kind of bridge that gap as they advance in their Finnish language skills. So really, thanks for bringing that up, Stella. Excellent. Okay, then
I could also comment
on
the for the amount of university spots as well. I think that's also a big problem in Espoo as well, as there's only one main university, which is Aalto, and that has business and business and engineering. Mm-hmm. Obviously, depends on what you want to study. In the engineering field, there's actually a very large difference between how hard it is to get. For example, for electrical engineering, it's pretty easy. You can get in with pretty okayish grades, but then if you want to go study chemical engineering or I'm not sure about the English term, it's called tuotantotalous, that's extremely hard to get into.
Okay.
And then then there isn't really any for the other degree programs law and those things, they're in Helsinki, but obviously there's I think there should be more study places for university students in Espoo as well.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
glad you brought that up. And this is something that, this is kind of the point where Shushu is at in life right now, trying to, find the best way forward with university studies. And absolutely, there would be great if we had more study places right here in Espoo. I know a lot of people would like to study close to home, and Aalto has a great reputation, but simply a lot more demand than supply. And so, Shushu, what's your own perspective on the number of, about how difficult it is to get into university at this point, since you're now in that application process?
Yes, well, personally now I have just applied for medicine, and of course there's no medical university or a university which has a faculty for medicine in Espoo, or the closest one is Helsinki at the moment, but they're all pretty spread out, and there are only 4 of them in Finland overall. So it is very hard to get into Aalto as well. Of course, it depends a lot on the faculty you are applying for, but it would be nice to maybe also have another university for maybe more sciences. Of course, engineering is a science, but maybe I was thinking more medicine as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or yeah, and I actually had a point for the high schools as well, because they are mainly in English. If you want to study high school in English, then there's really only IB. Of course, in Helsinki, there's also the EB, which is the European Baccalaureate. But it would be nice also if there was like a Finnish curriculum, but in English in Espoo as well. For example, if you don't want to just study maybe 6 subjects, and you're not good at writing long-term essays like the EE and the TOK or long presentations, then it might be nice to have an option of studying in English, but maybe not necessarily the IB.
Absolutely. I think that would be a dream for a lot of students, because there are some clear differences between the national curriculum and the IB, and the IB is not for everyone. There are students, I'm certain, I know we've had plenty of students who have gone on to study in the IB just based on English language ability and maybe not having strong enough Finnish language, but that would be outstanding. So English language, national curriculum, bilingual national curriculum, anything would be a big improvement to the selection offered in Espoo. Great. Have you had Shushu, any idea of how challenging it is to get in to universities now that you're applying in general, not just
in general? Well, of course there are always faculties that have more demand, like medicine, many sciences, engineering, of course your humanities, law, all of those. But then of course there are lots of faculties that have very little demand. I remember when I was applying, because you do it in opintotie, or is it opintopolku now? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But when you're applying, you can of course apply to 5 different places, and then you get a long list. So if you don't necessarily write down the name of the institute or the faculty you're going for, you just get a long list of every single option.
Okay.
Which is very interesting. So when I was reading through that, because I was doing it with a friend and she took forever to do, so I just read through all of them. I saw a lot of different faculties there that many people don't actually take into consideration. Like, for example, if you want to just study pure mathematics, then of course very few people actually do that. Or very few people go for teaching. So for example, if you just want to teach a primary school or even middle school, then there are specific faculties you can go to, which is education, of course,
right,
where you can go, and then you can apply for it separately as well. So of course it's kind of supply and demand that aren't exactly meeting with all of those. So there are lots of different places you can apply to, but then many people go for the big ones.
Right,
or the ones that
popular ones.
Yeah, that people talk about more, and of course the ones that the guidance counselors tend to push more, or talk about more.
Yeah, and your kind of field you're aiming for with medicine is a good example of one where we need actually a larger supply of physicians in Finland, and yet there's quite a limited supply of study places available. So this is that's a national issue, but something else that maybe will improve someday. All right, thanks. Now it's kind
You
of.
think I could butt in quickly there, Jay?
Go ahead, George.
Yeah. Just about what Shushu said about avoiding the extended essay and the TOK essay. If you want to go study medicine, you think you can get away with not doing 4,000 word essay as well. It's probably not going to turn out too well. And I'll say that both those assignments are absolutely great experiences, and they may seem scary before you do them, but with every large project, it's one small problem at a time that you need to solve, and then after you do it, you feel so accomplished, honestly.
Excellent. So some words of comfort for you, Stella. That's coming up not too long.
They help.
Yeah. Thanks, Jordan.
The TOK essay especially, it was one of the most enjoyable assignments that I had in high school.
All right. Excellent. I don't know. The look on Magnus's face doesn't tell me he agrees, but I'm not going to go there.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was all right, but definitely wasn't my favorite assignment.
Yeah. Honesty's a virtue. Okay, Magnus, now that you got your mic on, we're going to go to you. Can you give us kind of some of your own perspective on, even though you've moved outside of Espoo for education, give us your own perspective on how the COVID crisis has affected students?
Well, I think like one of the most important things that I learned personally from is like how much we actually take for granted that we can like actually physically see each other people, and how like important it is, because like at least I've noticed a really big decrease in my motivation just because I don't really enjoy going to school anymore, because now it's just like waking up and turning my laptop on and that's it. Also, another thing that I've learned a lot from is that like because of the fact that most of our lectures are pre-recorded, and we can pretty much just watch them whenever we want. So if we have a morning lecture, we don't necessarily have to wake up for that. Like we can watch that later. But then this also kind of tends to lead to the fact that all of the work starts kind of piling up. So then we have to like schedule our time like completely. So this is like, for me, it was like a really big challenge, because I started to realize that my work really, really started to pile up at the end.
Okay.
So yeah, that was a.
So it kind of gives you the opportunity to procrastinate is even more than people would kind of naturally.
Yeah, definitely. So I realized I was doing like one of my courses in like 3 days when it should be done in like a month.
Yeah.
But like,
well,
yeah.
it's a lot of it puts a lot of responsibility on students that are still kind of figuring out their way of studying too, even in university that continues to develop. So yeah, you mentioned, I guess, in some ways, kind of some of the positive things. That is there anything else that you one of the positive things that came out of this is you realized how special it is to be with people in person, since we've had that in many cases taken away. Is there anything else? Any other upsides to the pandemic?
Well, I mean, like I said before, like it kind of gives you your own time, and you can decide whenever you want to do things yourself. So also like you have to schedule it, yes, but it's a lot more flexible. So you can kind of like fit in other things into your schedule as well. So that was something that was really nice. But I mean, for me at least, the like cons definitely outweighed the pros of of this pandemic, because we also have like, as you already like, as everyone already knows, we have like student life, and that's a very big thing in like bachelor schools. And for this year, we've basically had nothing. And that's like something to look forward to after you've done like work, and we haven't had that. So that's also like decreased motivation for a lot of people, and made it particularly hard, because you haven't even been able to like really, for me at least, because I started like my university studies when like pandemic had already started, so it made it very hard to like even socialize and get to know people. Thankfully in like Lappeenranta we still had like kind of like a hybrid thing, but I still got to know like people somehow. But I heard for like people in Aalto, for example, like they've had their year completely online. Maybe they had like 1 or 2 courses on campus, but like it's been really hard for them to get to know each other properly.
Okay.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say it's clearly a lot more downsides than upsides. But it does sound like it did force you to learn some new time management skills that we wouldn't have normally had to have had. So maybe with some silver lining there. It'll be interesting to see what kind of changes, permanent changes there will be in the way that teaching and learning happens now that we're hopefully moving out of the worst of the pandemic. But fingers crossed, you'll get to have normal social lives next year. Let's hope.
Yeah.
All right. So then maybe on the same, along the lines of student well-being, we'll ask you, Stella, a little bit about something was touched on earlier by Jordan. What's your opinion of bullying in Espoo schools? Do you think it's a problem from your own experience or from what you've heard from others? And if so, what kind of bullying do you think is the most common?
Well, I think, or my kind of opinion is like a very narrow one because I've really only been surrounded by like mostly English speaking kind of groups and never really into like the Finnish kind of national sides at all because of being in Matliden. It's Finsve, the national side. And obviously something like bullying differs from school to school and person to person and really about the environment there. But I think it's kind of just as apparent in high schoolers as middle schoolers. I mean, maybe more so in middle schoolers because I think that age, the coming to be a teenager and everyone's kind of, I feel like high school's different in a sense where you're kind of, or at least for us, we chose to be there and in that certain high school. So we all kind of have like this common goal, but then in middle school, you're kind of just with everyone. And I think that was more of a problem there. But I mean, I can't really speak from personal experience, I don't think, but I definitely think many high schools are strong in this bullying idea or like handling it with guidance counselors and with welfare officers. And I think it's a new thing, but now we are doing these yearly kind of like health checkups, but it's like mental health checkups with the school, which I think is amazing because it's kind of like you don't have to go ask for help or say that something's happening. It's kind of online and you can like do these surveys and talk about what's happening. So that's something that's really strong. Yeah.
That sounds really neat. I actually haven't heard about that addition in the Lukios. That's really a very clever way of doing that.
Yeah, it's really great because they're super intricate surveys. And of course, if you have nothing to say, you don't have to say anything. But they ask about bullying from students, from teachers, if you're seeing it, experiencing it, stuff like that. So it's really, really nice
just
to have that.
general overall emotional well-being questions as well.
Yeah,
too.
of course,
Yeah,
that too.
that's great. Yeah, in some cases the unseen challenges that people may be having. So
Right.
great.
And then also maybe not just like within your own grade or side or whatever. I think there's some kind of course it depends from school to school again, but I think in a lot of IB schools, there's some kind of like prejudice against the IB line or like obviously it's the us versus them kind of thing that we're
kind of the
different
national
or
side and
whatever.
the IB side, you mean?
Well, yeah, but I guess that happens everywhere, separating grades into different groups and classes, but that's definitely something that exists, at least.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks. And I mean, so it sounds like you feel like in general that student well-being is pretty well supported in at least your own experience.
Yeah, I think, or if I hear from people are talking a lot about experiences of bullying, it's often in lower and lower middle school, which I wasn't here to experience. So, I don't really know, but of course it's like it happens everywhere, but at least I haven't noticed that it's super like a huge problem.
Okay. Yeah. Well, good to hear. Good to hear. So we've kind of, I've been challenge you all to answer some of these questions about your own experiences as Espoo students, and now kind of give you a chance to turn the tables a little bit and see if you all can maybe think of ways that would challenge me, because part of my own hope in someday possibly being on Espoo Council would be, part of it is to know what the issues are. And this is, really helpful to hear how things are in your own opinions and from your own perspectives now at different stages of education. But then also not just knowing the problems, but also trying to figure out solutions. So that's I would ask you to challenge me now. There are things that you can ask of me, and what kind of solutions I would propose to issues that you see within education. Do I see your hand up, Shushu?
Yes.
Oh, great. Oh, this is like the old days. Great.
I'm
Please go
sorry.
ahead.
I'm not good at just opening my mic and
No, it's
taking
great.
but I was in Tapiolan Lukio. I was in the student council as well as in ACE, but I was in the student council, and one of the biggest things that rose up about health and of course well-being at our school was we have a psychologist and a curator at our school that of course take care of all of those mental health issues or well-being and school stress, and our school has quite a high level of stress, as probably many who choose to go to high school. But the thing was that people were complaining, or students, sorry, were complaining a lot about the availability of times for the psychologist and curator, and our school can't do anything. So it's something that Espoo City has to decide on, because they were only there about twice a week for a couple of hours, maybe 4 hours.
Okay.
And some students felt like they needed more support or more times with them. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is actually something that that's actually been an issue that's come up quite a bit in the media in recently, because of, especially this past year, as the COVID crisis has taken a toll on a lot of people, and especially young people, in terms of mental health and stress and feeling isolated, the kind of issues that would need extra support. And so the resources were already limited to begin with, as far as the welfare officers or curatori and the psychologists. Nurses are going nonstop with just health checkups and have very little time just to have time for students to drop in to ask for advice or to bring up issues that they're experiencing. And so it's really, I think, in some ways the dam has kind of burst this past year and become even more difficult. And I know that, I was convinced, and this year it definitely has made it even clearer that there need to be more resources, whether it's the nurse or psychologist or welfare officer. This is something that is becoming an epidemic, and so I'm glad you mentioned it. But clearly, it needs to be it takes resources, takes money, and there will have to be essentially a reassessment of priorities. And I think one thing that Espoo is quite good about is taking care of young people, and I think that the city is proud of that reputation, and I think they want to keep that reputation. So I'm hoping that those who are influencing decisions can appeal to that pride, and hope that we can increase funding. Thanks for mentioning it. Good one. All right. Does anybody else have any other suggestions or challenges?
Well, if we're just talking about guidance counselors, obviously like availability is a big thing, I think, in most schools. But then also language barrier, or like, of course, to be, I think, hired as for like a welfare officer or something like that, you do have to be proficient in English, at least if there's an IB line. But I'm not trying to like call out specific teachers, but it's definitely difficult to, I think, feel comfortable with talking about something, or to even like reach out to someone if you can feel that there's some kind of language barrier or like lack of fluency and stuff. So that's another like small thing I think when it comes to student well-being.
Okay, yeah. So that's a good point, because it absolutely is when it comes to emotional support or mental health issues, that kind of clear communication is pretty critical. So having the linguistic abilities, or making sure there's linguistic abilities to cover at least in the area of the study language, in your case in English. So very good point. But that, I think, is something also, hopefully there are ways that could be communicated within the institution, but clearly that has to do with the personnel issues. And that has, I think, that at a city or committee level, that could be influenced in terms of hiring guidelines, preferences towards linguistic skills, for any of the welfare staff, guidance counselors, or welfare psychologists, nurses. All right, good point. Thanks, Stella. Okay, does anybody else have any other issues or challenges that you'd like to throw out there as ways that things that could be improved, or issues you've experienced or heard about from your own perspectives? It's good if you don't have too many. I mean, this is not a bad thing. I think we also have one of the, I think what I'm hoping to take away from the evening is maybe any of your own kind of ways of summarizing your own thoughts on your own wishes. If you could say, hey, if there's one thing that I wish that Espoo, would do for me as a student, for me as now Magnus is studying outside of Espoo now, but it's still your home, and chances are you'll probably end up back here at some point in your life. And this might have to do with things in the next stage of your lives, whether it's finishing up studies and going to work for Magnus, or going to university for Shushu, or wrapping up high school for Stella, and Jordan's on the verge of getting into the workforce. So, but are there any things in particular, anything that you can think of that you wish that that Espoo decision makers, those who are on the council or who have influence, that they could do to help improve things in any of the areas we talked about tonight, or anything else? Yeah, Shushu.
Yeah, well, I personally think that the key to any type of situation where a lot of people are interacting is just trying to establish an effective line of communication. And I think that's something that you've been portraying a lot. And I even remember out of a lot of the students a lot of the teachers at EIS, you were definitely one of the ones that actually made an effort to listen to what the students had to say. And sometimes it's easier to dismiss someone's opinion just because they're younger. They're 13 years old. What do they know? But kids can be surprisingly smart, and they can realize stuff that adults don't. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jordan. And that's actually a great point. I mean, I don't know if you all feel as though, as those who are, Espoo, Espoo is your home, or you're from there, or you're returning there. If you feel as though you actually have the ear of decision makers, and do you know essentially how to vaikuttaa? Do you know how you can have an influence on society through Espoo decision making? because that's not always clear. Those lines of communication are not always clear. So that might be something that could be improved to make it clear that students have actually quite a bit of influence, especially when you are or close to being voting age or already are voting age. Then you actually have the power of your vote. So people who are hoping to have that vote tend to listen a little more carefully. So you have that influence, but it needs to, of course, go beyond election periods. It's only once every 4 years. So good. So any other thoughts? Yeah, sure. Yeah,
Yes.
sorry, you were about to go.
Oh, no worries. Another thing that came up usually, because student council, you talk to a lot of students, and one of the big things is now during this new this opintosuunnitelma that is going to be taking place now since 2021 in the autumn, I think, or maybe later, I'm not sure. But the main idea is that Espoo City has now decided to change the curriculum in Finnish schools now so that it's more university-like. So you're going to, if I give a basic idea now, so instead of having a certain amount of courses you have to do, so now in Finnish schools you have to do 75 courses, it's going to be more like university, so you're going to get a certain amount of points for something. And a lot of complaints came from this among my peers. And the main thing was that many people, even though you decide to go to high school, you may not necessarily want to go to university. So many of the Finnish high schools, or the high schools with the Finnish curriculum, are gearing students very much towards university, even though the students might then want to go to ammattikorkeakoulu. Sorry, I don't know what that is. Higher vocational school.
Yeah, University of Applied Sciences. Yeah.
So it'd be nicer still, especially now that high school or this upper secondary education is going to become obligatory. It'd be nicer if it weren't just so geared towards university studies, but more towards further studies in any faculty or anything you would like to do in the future.
Okay. Yeah. Good point. Yeah, these I think they call them opintopiste. There's 150 points now that students, study credits that you have to have in order to graduate within the national line anyway. So interesting point that it is a bit more maybe geared towards the next step being more towards university as opposed to other options. So good point. Hey, I have. Does anyone else have anything else? Because I want to throw one more thing out there before we kind of maybe wrap things up soon. One of the things I wanted to say, because I'm happy to see. I don't know how many people are listening in on Facebook, but it's great to see some other familiar names here in Zoom. And I did want to say that anyone who's listening in, who's interested in being part of the conversation, then there's an easy way of doing that, and that's through the website that I set up for the campaign. It's just jthompson.fi, and there's a way of leaving your contact information if you, for example, would be interested in being a part of a future panel, or if you have some issues that you think, I wish that this had come up, because I think this is actually a real issue that I'd like to have heard within Espoo leadership. So welcome you to do that. It's a simple way of doing that. But the last one I want to throw out there, because in part of the platform that we're emphasizing tonight, of course, is education. But the two other main pillars of my campaign are environment and entrepreneurship. And I think that I'd be curious to hear about your perspectives on how do you think that Espoo is doing with in the fight against climate change? Do you all have any perspective on that from your your age and your teens or in the early 20s, I'm curious to hear what's your perspective on that. Kind of throw it out there to see. Do you think that things are going well? Do you have this fear that a lot of people have expressed because of this climate change that's upon us? What are your thoughts? Does anybody have any thoughts on that? You don't have to.
Well,
I throw out a curveball. Yes, Stella?
I mean, I think the only way I kind of seen it is more on like an individual level when it comes to, efforts towards climate change and environmentalism and stuff. But I know part of it's the IB curriculum, but I think in national side curriculum and stuff too, they really try and implement it into teaching, or that's what I've noticed at least, that it's a big aspect of if we're studying like economics or geography or stuff like that. Obviously that's because it's a bigger issue for our generation now, but I notice that, and I think that's like a really good thing.
Yeah, that's a great point. So it is something that is now a required part of the national curriculum, which is great. Good feedback. Excellent. Jordan, your camera's on. Did you have a thought on that?
Yeah, I definitely concur with what Stella said, and also, you have to give credit where credit is due, and even whatever efforts they may be, it's something that should be looked well upon. And I mean, there's even significantly large project. If you think about Lansing Metro, for instance, I think in the long term that's going to show to be a lot more efficient form of transportation in terms of emissions and such.
Oh, with
And all
Lansing
these
Metro.
things,
Lansing Metro. Yeah. You said Lansing
Yeah,
Metro, right? Yeah.
yeah, Lansing Metro, yeah, and also all these smaller things like the Aleppo bikes, and I think Espoo could maybe try to implement those scooters here in places where there's people that are more densely populated. But yeah, like I said, you should give credit where credit is due. At this point, I think they do emphasize, as I understand, they do emphasize the curriculum, and people from a young age understand this is a pressing issue. It's probably going to be affecting them a lot more than the older generation. Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Thanks a lot.
I also had like a small comment
Magnus,
that
yeah.
I also agree with like Stella as well, that like it should be in the curriculum, and it's like very important. It's good that they're bringing it into the curriculum because, for example, in our degree in our university, we had like a whole course dedicated to climate change. Like the course name was called Climate Change, and it was actually really useful because like it kind of showed you your own carbon footprint and showed you how like much you're kind of producing. I kind of realized I'm producing quite a lot of carbon. So this is kind of like, this was like really useful for me because now I can know how to change my ways. But like this could be like, I feel like this kind of course could be implemented into like high school as well, because obviously not everyone goes to study engineering or a science like subject, and they're not going to have the same kind of experience that I have. But I feel like it would be good if there would be more of that in high school as well, or like middle school even maybe.
Yeah, you're sounds like both of you are, well, all three of you have mentioned a bit, but starting off with you, Stella, is really, it does start with the individual, of course, with our own actions, but that this is tied in with the kind of how aware we are of the issues. And there is a lot of debate about this. And of course, in most cases, well, in many cases, reducing our carbon footprint takes knowing what to do, and it may actually take more money. It might cost more to cut down on, but it may just be simple everyday choices that are just things that we do differently because we know better. So, interesting point, and that's good to know that this is this required component of education is something that's been received well, and that could be developed further. That's great. All right. Well, we are at an hour. Is there anybody who has any kind of any kind of closing comments or anything you want to share at the end here? I've learned a lot from you guys, and I really appreciate your time. And I don't want to take for granted the fact that you all have a lot going on in your lives right now, whether it's studying for some pretty important tests, or that you are, getting ready for kind of this next stage of life, like Shushu's got going on here. So thank you again for that. And I take your thoughts and your opinions to heart. So thank you for that. I did want to just to mention that as far as in the coming, just to kind of a timeline here, it's on the 11th of May. We're just over a month away from Election Day on the 13th of June. But prior to that, we have starting on the 26th of May is early voting. And that's something that I think in many ways is kind of a well-kept secret, these advanced voting stations that are located throughout Espoo in quite convenient locations. So it challenged those who are able to vote, that you don't forget to exercise that. And I think many people are interested in doing it early because it's a chance to do so with probably a smaller crowd. But the threshold is, they make it easy to vote in Finland, which is a really great democratic value this country has. And we'll be having some more online live events here. So we'll keep promoting those on social media channels, and would hope to hear from any of you that have any thoughts on and suggestions. And of course, if you want to get involved with the campaign, absolutely would welcome your involvement, whether that has to do with hanging up campaign posters coming up in the next week or so, or just simply telling people about the campaign. So thank you very much, everyone, for being here, and have a great evening.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for inviting us.
All right. Best of luck.
Yeah,
It was
Jay,
good seeing
it's
you.
great that you did something that's it's a bit more out of the box than what the regular candidate would do. So, props to that.
Thanks a lot, Jordan. I appreciate it. Yeah. Thanks to all of you. All right. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Bye, Jay.